Present day. Present time.
Hello everyone. The thread that I made this time is what is a pretentious anime for you? Some people dismiss certain shows because they think they are pretentious. This is a definition that may vary from person to person, which causes it to become a buzzword. From my perspective, something can't be pretentious if it's genuinely trying to convey a message through its out-of-the-norm storytelling or structure in an effective way. That means that if someone is able to dissect an anime's messages because the story is told in such a planned-out way, for example through foreshadowing, then it's probably unfair to dismiss it as being just pretentious without giving it a second try at least. A practical example of this is when I watched Lain for the first time some years ago. Even though I enjoyed the overall message of the show, there was a lot to dissect there clearly, but I also thought that there were some scenes in there that were just added for flavor or artistic reasons that I honestly thought just didn't make much sense. Now I'm rewatching Lain with some friends and I only watched 3 episodes, but in those 3 episodes there were so many shots and little details that seemed irrelevant at first, but there was a lot of subtext and valuable information in those shots that allowed us to discuss the topics in each episode much more clearly rather than just watching it once and getting to the next episode right away. Many of Ikuhara's works, like Sarazanmai, which is his most recent anime, or Revolutionary Girl Utena, have a lot of symbolism. Some of it is actually pretty straightforward and easy to understand, but a lot of it not so much. I understand why some people would call Ikuhara's shows pretentious, but above all, I think in these particular cases, these types of storytelling and story structures and visual representations that look weird at first or very forced are what define the director's vision. And it's interesting to see these patterns repeat throughout the director's career, because now when I watch a series made by Ikuhara, I know that I can be on the lookout for these elements that he always displays on his anime. For example, when Sarazanmai was airing, many people criticized the overusage of the same scenes, and many were criticizing it for being a way to save the budget. Even though it obviously helps, that's first of all a callback to magical girl shows, where you see the same transformations every episode, but not only that, it's a stylistic choice. And it's important to understand what the creator means when he has all this weird stuff going on. Very rarely it is random. There's always a purpose, or at least some kind of inspiration for it. Even if it's something that's irrelevant to the plot, it might just be his personal touch. You know, Tarantino has feet and gore, and Ikuhara has magical girls and cute animals, for example. Anyways, let's see what people have to say on this matter. I'm pretty sure most people who call anime pretentious just don't understand it, although there are some shows like Classroom of the Elite that really are. Well, even the user below says Classroom of the Elite. It was quite entertaining as a high school anime, but the scenes that were supposed to be deep made me cringe so hard. I remember some scenes in that show being a bit too much. I remember while I was watching it that I thought the show was trying a bit too much. I think it should have kept a lighter tone. Yeah, I understand what they mean. I somewhat feel the same with movies like 5 centimeters per second, Spirited Away, Your Name, Weathering with You. But on a second thought, I think I wasn't in really good mood when I watched them. That's very important. For example, I remember watching Ghost in the Shell and even Akira some years ago, and all I watched back then was mainstream anime. So when I watched those, even though the animation was great, I just didn't care about cyberpunk settings and things that had to be interpreted a bit, or things that made me think a bit more than I was used to. So I actually got quite bored And some people in those cases might jump to the conclusion that it's pretentious because it's trying to feed you too much information, or it's trying to present its plot in a non-conventional way, at least for what you're used to. Perhaps you weren't in the mood, or perhaps you just had to look a bit further into it. Just because the meaning of something is behind some layers doesn't mean it's automatically pretentious. I think it's more about the execution of the creator's intention that might make it pretentious or not. Some people say that they just never use that term altogether, which I think it's fine. Even though pretentious is a word in the dictionary, it's like calling something underrated or overrated, you know? It's a very loose term to describe something that in many cases can be discussed. Monocrosanity here says, I don't understand how media can be pretentious. Can the creators, scriptwriters, and directors be pretentious? Yeah, but I find it hard to understand how their pretentiousness is translated to actual books, films, and anime. I guess I've always viewed it as a word to describe someone's behavior. Well, yeah, it has something to do with the behavior in the sense that maybe the creator wants to get to a certain point or wants to develop a certain theme or message, but it's forcibly trying to do it in a roundabout way, not because the method it chose is the most effective one or is the one that will convey the message to the audience in the best way or in the way that it envisions, but because it's simply for the sake of being unconventional. If someone is doing something just to impress the audience, I think that's clearly a sign of something pretentious. An anime is pretentious when the author tries to shove down my throat a theme, acting like it's deep when in reality it's just cheap and worthless trash. An ambitious anime that I do not like. For me, pretentiousness is the very definition of try hard. Sometimes it might not even be bad, just an idea that the author took too far and out of their own reach. The anime themselves aren't pretentious, but the reviewers and fans can be. I personally don't like labeling any form of art as pretentious to avoid downplaying the ambition behind it. Bunny Girl Senpai, most of the theories mentioned are useless when you realize it sells itself as a dumb waifu-bait anime. Anime that uses already existing philosophical quotes and people rather than forming it on their own, like Ergo Proxy and Psychopaths, although I like both. So, even though you like Ergo Proxy and Psychopaths, you still think they are pretentious because they use the quotes? I mean, the thing is, there's no issue in quoting a philosopher or whoever it might be in order to tackle a certain theme. That only becomes an issue when said quote is only there so the show looks smart and not because it's relevant to the story. Watching Evangelion, I'm starting to understand why people call it pretentious. It's getting so confusing, so I guess some people think they're very smart if they can piece it together. Actually, Evangelion is not that complicated to understand. The last few episodes are quite a mindfuck. I don't think it's fair to call it pretentious just because certain people find themselves smart for putting the pieces together. Actually, the fun part of most of these shows is that you can interpret them in many different ways. I remember when I watched Utena back then, it was so late at night, and I finished the last arc of the show, and I had so many thoughts going through my head. I immediately spent like 1 to 2 hours just searching up reviews and interpretations online, and then I came up with my own. That's one of the things that structuring a story in an unconventional way does. Some people like that, some people don't. Some people like the author to be as explicit as possible to them, because not doing so means laziness or pretentiousness precisely. It's good to see that many people don't really like to use this word. You can use it, but use it moderately. Make sure that you actually made an effort to understand what was being said and why it was being said in that specific way before you say that something is pretentious. Using random philosophical quotes might come out as pretentious, but Even in those cases, try to understand if those quotes are at least supported by the narrative. Try to understand if what you're watching is the author or the director's style, or if it's trying to be different just for the hell of it. So let me know, what is a pretentious anime for you? What are some anime that you might consider pretentious? Thank you very much for watching and see you next video.
ご視聴ありがとうございました。はい、みんな登録してくれてありがとう。そして
登録しなかったそこのお前、今からお前んち行くからな。